Well, I'll start with an introduction. Dwight, it's great. We're in this new space here. We're having this podcast. It's our round 3 that we've been talking about tariffs. Quick introduction for those that haven't seen him before. Dwight Nordstrom, chairman of PRI, 30 plus years of experience doing business in China, having lived in China, adopted 2 daughters from China. The Chinese experience, and brings a wealth of knowledge and global insight, not just with the Chinese market, but other markets around the world. And so, again, thank you for being with us today. And the last 2 times we talked, there's been changes going on in the market, specifically around tariffs, business climate. Even this last week, we've had more tariff changes and things going on. The last time that we talked, you talked about the trip that you had just taken to go to Washington, D.C.
Sure.
And some of the things that you ran into there. So give us an update since the last conversation. What's been going on? What are you seeing? What changes should someone in the manufacturing community understand, know?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. And what I like about today, among many things, is that we're together in person.
It's fun.
And in-person meetings always beats video, phone call. Secondly, I have not been back to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area for about 5 years, and told people I was going to be here for 3 days. I've had 14 business meetings.
That's awesome.
Mostly at factories. And then owners wanting to come talk, and presidents wanting to come talk about markets, their challenges. And so the tariff question, though it's a specific area, really deals with competitive advantage. And so I'm happy to talk about that. I did also want to say my wife, who's, been in China for 30 plus years as well. She's from small town, Minnesota. And she's a keeper, and people say all the women are strong, and I say, well, the women are strong and good looking, so she's great. So on the tariff side, we're talking today is July 10th.
Yep.
And the tariff issues remain a massive issue. We're not faced with the 145% tariff. But effectively, for a lot of companies, they're looking at 60% tariffs. So our whole U.S. holding company, we have 10 plus operations. A rough approximation, I had one of my guys try to figure it out a couple days ago, just so I could say this, is about 37%. What that tells you is we've been very proactive in trying to mitigate. You do not eliminate. But again, in business, it's compared to competitors. And I would say even a recent study by KPMG proved that those that are proactive in trying to mitigate tariffs, and again, these are two-way tariffs. So this is not just U.S. import duties on products, and we're talking about products, not services, which are very difficult to have tariffs on. Are not just U.S. import duties on products made and assembled and shipped from China, but also the reverse. China put on tariffs. So today I was at a company that does linear motion control systems, and they're making things in the U.S. shipping to China, and it's causing enormous headaches. And we gave them some ideas, such as trying to get exemptions. The Chinese government, if you know how to connect, are oftentimes willing to consider giving specific exemption for specific products. And that's what you need. You're typically not looking at shipping 1,000 part numbers and family of parts, but, you're looking at typically 2 to 20. And so I'll just say, if as a Minnesota company, if you're saying, well, the tariff situation with my exports to China make it untenable, please don't think that. For a couple reasons. One includes China's close to 20% of the world GDP, and that's not going down. The U.S. is another 20 plus. So by far the 2 largest countries in the world. But secondly, the Chinese manufacturers, as well as the government's giving incentives for them to actually move some of their downstream production from China to other parts of the world. And so when they move, so instance, one company I was with does tier 1 auto supply, tier 1, tier 2. And it was like, we're not getting the ability to sell to the Chinese EV OEM in China. I said, but have you tried to get their Egyptian production facility and their Hungary production facility? They said, we didn't even know they had them. And I said, those two locations are going to be much more open to sourcing from the U.S. or doing some other creative agreement. So don't leave China sales. Don't let the tariff situation stop you from understanding. If you want to be number 1 or number 2 in your specific niche in the world, you got to be in China. So, maybe just to give a sweetener. So certainly bonded warehouses are a way, we're in such a point of day-to-day flexibility. Even this week, there have been some changes. And August 9th is a key date for when the initial 90-day agreement that was signed in Switzerland between the U.S. and China expires, which I think President Trump was, frankly, fairly smart in having that a month after all the other rest of the world 90-day exemptions, because he wants to sell China, which is a huge problem. Okay, what other deals are we getting to give them some baselines? I anticipate a deal will not be signed with China. The Swiss deal was really a Band-Aid, and it was just a temporary thing. So I think by August 9th, what we're going to get maybe a few incremental, but there doesn't appear to be enough deals with other major trading companies, specifically or particularly the EU. And so the EU's got to almost fall before China in terms of what they're going to do. So I would just say that what this is telling you is expect maybe some shocks after August 9th. Let's just play a scenario that could very well happen. August 9th comes, the tariffs go from right now, if you're paying 60%, they go back to 145, or in our case, 37 to, let's say, 80%. And but within 2 weeks, China can't live with that. So China will bend in some way. And so let's say it's a 2-week time period. You have something that's being shipped. It arrives August 11th. Do you pay that 145% interest, import duty? Well, I would suggest, unless you're total just in time and it makes economic necessity, I'd put the stuff in a bonded warehouse and just wait and draw down only as needed. But I suspect, you'll have a reduction of over half of that. And I think it's going to be well over half within a 2 to 5 week time period. So that's an example.
So you have 3 things that you brought up there that I'd like to point out.
Sure.
Too. The first one is the bonded warehouse piece. And so you talked about the bonded warehouse going to China. Works the same way coming back to the U.S.
It does.
Okay.
So you can have, and again, actually we have bonded warehouses in China, the U.S., and Mexico. So that we have access to. Yep. Right now, I don't think that China has much in it at this point. But just to say, it's going both ways. So product from China to the U.S. can be in all 3 locations. Well, you say, why would a Chinese supplier want a bonded warehouse in China? Well, the answer is they get an export VAT rebate of somewhere between 7 to 12% for most of the products that Minnesota companies or other companies in the U.S. are making. So those guys do not want to sit on that. You bring it to the bonded warehouse, it's labeled as exported, even though physically it's still within geographical China. Mexico similarly, bonded in the U.S. similarly, until it crosses the U.S. customs officially. And if it's in the bonded warehouse, it hasn't, you don't have to pay the import duties. And import duties are not the day of shipment. It is a day it's processed by the HTS code with the U.S. Customs. So that's
a key thing that everybody should be looking at setting up. The second thing you talked about was the sales piece, really in having a sales, not pulling back from sales in somewhere like China. So the whole idea of, okay, I'm manufacturing, I'm shipping there. I don't think it's tenable, but China's still a 20% market. And then you brought up the Egypt and some of these other country situations. So going back to that idea of I need a sales team. If I've been international and I've been selling in China, don't walk away from the Chinese market, not just for the Chinese market, but tell me more about the understanding around how the implications of selling in China also affect these other geographies, because you may or may not get the sale for China, but by working with them, you might get sales in these other countries.
Great. Happy to do that. And let's focus on medical component parts, and let's focus on auto parts, particularly EV, maybe some internal combustion, and auto interiors and some exteriors. So right now, China has a retaliatory import duty on products made in the U.S. that are shipped to China. If you believe your product or family of products is number one or number two in the world in your specific niche, and I'll just go, I'm a Jack Welch fan. I loved my time at GE in the 80s. And, he drilled us on this to, carefully define my niche. But if I'm not number one or number two, really consider getting out of that. But I think there's lots of opportunities, carefully define the niche. And if you're not in a strategic industry for the U.S. or China. So the U.S. is becoming more like China. The U.S. has now looked at 15, 20 different strategic areas: shipbuilding, semicon, aluminum, and some of the materials, steel. It has a variety of industries. It said for our national defense, we need basic pharmaceuticals. We need to stay ahead of the curve, and we're going to basically help resource those and be preferential for production in the U.S. Okay, so we're not talking about those industries. The good and the bad of that, when you have those type of industries, in most cases, you don't become very efficient.
Because you're propped up in some ways.
You're propped up in some ways.
Yep.
And so China also has those 20 plus industries. And so I'm talking about directly working in that industry with the completed product. No, I can make parts for pharmaceutical factories. That's not a strategic industry for China or for the U.S. per se. So you need the Chinese companies are being highly incentivized to bring production and sales to the rest of the world, not including the U.S. And so they've said, yes, structurally, the amount of the imports on a percentage basis of what the U.S. sells to China is going to go down if you're looking at the next 10 years vis-a-vis other countries. I'm sorry, exports. Yep. So Chinese exports to the U.S. as a percentage of the total exports is going to go down as a percentage. Nominal dollar value probably still going to go up. And so I was just talking today with a linear motion control company, and they're like, we're having trouble selling to this Chinese OEM for an interior part in a car vehicle. And I'm like, well, have you talked to their Egyptian factory? Have you talked to their Hungary factory? And they were like, we didn't. The Hungary and the Egyptian factories for this Chinese e-vehicle, they are going to be much more open to sourcing from the U.S.
So going to that conversation, though, do you have to talk to do you have to talk in China, or do you have to talk to the group directly in Egypt or Hungary?
The answer is both.
You have to do both. Okay.
You have to do both, but look at China's following the pattern of the U.S. international transplants. When you have a complex thing, ultimately, initially, where headquarters is at, I mean, it's going to take 5 to 10 years minimum for the local design team to actually have more authority. So the local purchasing has happened locally. So the POs are typically cut in Egypt, in Hungary, but you get on the qualified vendor list
back in China.
Yeah. And they do all the life testing, et cetera.
Got it. Okay, so that helps from that. So that reinforces the need.
You need to have sales in China.
In China at that point.
And I'll tell you, the most dynamic sales team, you always have a hunter, but what you really need is an application engineer. And so, if you're in an industry, there's only a couple potential customers, get your application engineer. But the speed, China operates innovation at lightning speed. That's where and I'll just tell you, it's been very classic for us to acquire a company here in the last 15 years. And they might have a manufacturer from a U.S. or European, Israeli group. And they might have one engineer in the factory, and quickly I have 10 to 20.
Hmm.
And, I'm responding then very quickly to customers' needs. The days of you have sales only in China, you send back to headquarters to try and come up with some solutions doesn't really work.
So the application, the technology people on the ground, working the other end, engineer to engineer. We talked about that.
Engineer,
Yeah.
and what you're typically doing is we're not talking threshold R&D. We're talking applied modifications. Size, feel, shape, color, cosmetics, texture. All those things need a China. Even the semicon business that we sell parts to needs a little different, and so you'll need to take standard parts and slightly modify them.
Mm. The third thing you had brought up earlier that I'm not sure everybody fully understands is, you talked about like even within 2 weeks, a tariff goes into place and China can't like live in the way that even in 2 weeks, they're going to have to make some decisions. They're going to have to bend. I'm not sure everybody fully still understands what does that mean, right? The impact in terms of time when tariffs go to in effect, and what then that impact is both directions between China and the U.S. or in the world economy, and then what that actually does to, like, maybe help us understand what that does to making decisions rapidly for these tariffs discussions, right?
So let's just give an example,
Right.
And the challenge of hypothetical is that if anyone listening feels it's too close to their situation, apologies in advance. But let's do no name. So let's say I'm a bicycle manufacturer, and I'm importing. Let's say I'm doing $3 million of revenue a year, and my shipments are in 20-foot containers. Each shipment is about $200,000. So it's being shipped from China. And so I'm taking possession in the U.S. I'm not working through a distributor here. The container lands at Long Beach, and when I go through customs, that's when U.S. Customs says, okay, that is, you now owe this amount of money. Let's say I'm currently paying 50%, 60%. If August 10th happens, my container arrives the 13th, I may be paying $200,000. So now what do? Do you ask that container to turn around? It's challenging. You can do it, but it's challenging. I'm sure it may happen. Of course, if you have a perishable product, then you've got real challenges. But what you can do is, okay, know your customs broker and say, look here's my bill of lading, but I want this to actually sit in a bonded warehouse in the U.S. Keep it in a container. You'll get daily sort of charges for the container, but it's minimal compared to the cost. Everything is financially based and also just in time. And then why I said I don't think China can live with 100, Trump reverting to 135, 45% tariffs is they simply can't. And I mean, just take that. They can't. And so they have to do something.
What tangibly happens on the other side? Like, because you had talked about.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just taking one of our factories. So most of our factories are not. Majority of sales are not to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I make sales to China. I make sales to the rest of the world with our China production facilities. And by the way, we have China plus one in Bulgaria, hopefully implemented in the Philippines here, and possibly even now in Mexico for South America and the free trade zone that Mexico and South America has for some composite applications. And help me with my train of thought here. So
You're going back. So you're talking about, okay, there's a reciprocal tariff.
Oh yeah,
and I'm in China, and like I can't live on that for multiple weeks.
So
why?
One of my simpler products is shower doors and trays.
Yep.
250 people in the factory. By April 15th, I put on sort of an indefinite leave because we didn't know what was going to happen. Switzerland did not happen to the end of the month. I put on about 130 on leave. And so the amount of compensation I owed them was much less. And then I called them back once the agreement was reached. But we could not live with 130 45%
So basically,
tariff.
it shuts factories down.
It shuts factories down.
Yeah, and invariably the problem is like we talked about.
So for about a month and plus, I kept asking my GMs when I would do my calls with them, and I traveled to China a lot, but I was here in the States in April and May, and we'll talk about that with the Washington D.C. trip. So one of the things I asked them is, okay, so on your daily commute, how many containers did you see? And like in one of the cities, his 15-minute commute, he would see on average 40 containers just one way going. He said, Dwight, it's under 10 right now. So it's like, pretty clamping up of stuff.
So it doesn't work in the end. So there has to be some sort of a shift to get it back to reasonable. Otherwise, business stops. So from a volatility standpoint, if you're looking at like how long can these things stay in place,
I think so. I think systemically. So now you're asking, what do I think over the next 2 years?
Right.
One of the things that the Washington, D.C. trip, so this was at the last week of May, we met with multiple U.S. senators, multiple congressmen, multiple think tanks, met with the Chinese ambassador. This was a group of 10 U.S. company CEOs that run the China operation. So it would run the gamut from large aerospace companies, large petrochemical, large digital. FedEx came. And so I was part of that group and because when they got to certain manufacturing, they asked Dwight, okay, this guy, he's got his 10 plus operations. And so, but a commonality across from Democrat to Republican in DC today is there's no longer a debate about how do we describe the U.S.-China relationship. Is it strategic competition? Is it many different things? Right now, the next 10 years, there's an agreement that the word we use is they're our adversary. Okay, so China's our adversary with the U.S., and I think we're talking about the CCP. And then again, I'm talking about the DC perspective. And so, just recognize as you try and conduct business, it's almost unheard of in the world's history. I mean, if you're going back even to 3,000 years BC. So we really haven't had two economies together making up 40+% of the world's economy. And that's where we're at right now. And so even though the two systems are very different, and I told you already, the U.S. is moving in the direction of the CCP in regards to picking, approximately 20 different strategic industries. That number is going to vary here as more definitions.
But it's more strategic than it has been historically, where the CCP has always been, we're going to do this.
Well, certainly, actually, I would say no to that. My first factory in China was 83. I didn't own it. Then with GE, and then our family started investing in early 1990s. I've been a GM at 7 operations. Some greenfield, some acquisitions. No, I don't think China really, the made in China was actually just about 13 years ago.
Okay.
And you had China that said we want to learn from the West. So certainly the car companies came over. Obviously there's a lot of intellectual property rights violations, but it's really been in the current party secretary's chairman, Xi Jinping. He's the one that has really sort of moved the dial where now the bulk of the Chinese economy has some state ownership in it.
And so people are talking a lot right now because, especially in the manufacturing community, they talked about these first 6 months and, hit volatility and everybody all over the place. But a lot of people they're looking at the next 6 months. How's the back half of the year going to go? And you hear various things from people, but do you have what you believe is kind of, or what you're seeing is where the markets are going, at least for the next 6 months, kind of thoughts and perspectives on that and what people might want to look at?
Again, I would say that's highly industry specific. Can you further refine the question? Like, are you related to China and the same?
Yeah, and so like a lot of some of the concerns that are going on right now is you have this volatility in tariffs back and forth and back and forth. So maybe the first question is, do you see that continuing through the rest of the year? That kind of...
I do. I see the volatility for the rest of 25 in the tariffs.
Yep.
So I anticipate my guesstimate is there'll be another interim agreement sometime the last part of August, early September. I mean, the dates, I've said this for decades now. So I think we're pretty good at predicting what the CCP will do.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they will do it. So now you've got to add to that the variable of the U.S. executive administration. So that complicates the picture. But I do not see where there cannot be at least a rollover of the agreement from Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
I think by the end of the year, if enough bilateral trade deals are reached by the U.S. and other countries of the world, they'll be able to use that with China. And, my best guesstimate is China will have, compared to the worst other import duty entering the U.S., China will be somewhere 20 to 30% more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Could get lower than 20. It's not going to be lower. So let's just say the rest of the world's at 10% import duty. China will be at 30%, but that's plus or minus. And, 30% is frankly doable, given a lot of the efficiencies. If it's 50, 80, 90, it's not doable.
And so that volatility will probably continue through the end of the year.
So you're going to need to be highly flexible, put that in your systems. We were at the one meeting we had, on the invite list, I know there's about 50 Minnesota-based CEOs, I suggested you should know your logistics person by name because you're going to need their services because it's a hassle to actually take something that's got a bill of lading and, they want to process it. They want to collect their $100 fee or whatever it is. And you got to say, no, I got to shift this now to a bonded warehouse or, example, if we know there's going to be a big bump up, you might decide to air freight a portion of it and get the stuff, the change in import duty, for valuable lighter weight products may make sense. Let's just air freight this thing as we got this. What I will tell it's too late now. It's July 10th and shipments are roughly 21 to 24 days on the ocean from East Coast China to Westport. If you're talking Houston, you're at 40. But, I was telling everybody, get it in before the August 9th because I suspect we'll have a couple weeks of so the volatility,
volatility continue.
Will continue at the end of the year. I think at the end of the year, the two things to settle on is anticipate China will be about 20% more than the worst other countries. Let's say 30% versus the U.S. But on the other side, I think China's going to commit to buy hundreds of billions of dollars over some indeterminate time period of U.S.-made product. I think this is a great time to actually get sales and application engineers in China. I was with a company, they're in an oligopolistic market, Minnesota company. We've worked with them for 19 years. And their programs per sale are in the $20 to $80 million range. And great partnership. We've worked with them in multiple installs but what I suggested to them is you got to get your lobbyist, which they didn't have one. But I said, your lobbyist, I said, we can maybe help you a little bit, but we're not a lobbying company, when that deal's done, China's going to want a headline, $50 million deal done with U.S. company for their particular providing of frankly pretty complicated equipment in a non-strategic area.
And so with the volatility in place, going back to talking to those business leaders, is there other strategies knowing that there's going to, because a lot of times people aren't doing anything because of the volatility and the fears and those things. But if you look at the remainder of the year and you look at that volatility going to be remaining, talk about maybe the strategy.
Don't
defer the future.
Look at Jeff. I think, and we don't have time to go through 15 plus strategies of our operations that we've done. And I'm pulling that 50 number out. It's probably a little bit more than that. But look at one is you make a decision over the next 10 years. We made a strategic decision in 2018. We're fine with it. we've got to have something in the EU to do some final value-added assembly for certain parts. Again, these are OEM parts. We chose Bulgaria.
Mm-hmm.
And piggybacked on an existing operation. That's just one example. We have bonded warehouse capabilities in China, not that we own. I mean, we rent China, Mexico, and the U.S. For the South American market, working on, okay, let's use Mexico as our final value added, shipping from China to Mexico, final value added, shipped tariff free to the rest of South America. So we're only faced with what would be for this unfinished final product. And it's a change of HTS code, it's substantial transformation. So, there's not the transshipment issues. That's another thing. Definitely look at China sales and say, the China companies, they're leaving China, they're expanding out of China. You need to have sales in China and you'll be getting business with these guys. Aerospace, semicon, medical. We have the big 6 medical guys, but China's got 2 that are rapidly closing, and they're not going to be acquired by one of our top 6. So I would just say with the medical device guys and the component parts, you have to look, and your margins are not, I'll take our stent business. We sold it, but margins for us, our lowest margins were sales to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Mid-level margins were sales to China, and we had over 200 people in the company, and highest margins were sales to the U.S.
So part of as I'm thinking about the future direction, you'll hear people all the time. They have this kind of mindset. Oh, it's going to be better in the back half. I'll kind of wait 25. It out. 25. I can wait it out, or and what I'm hearing, and maybe you can help with that a little bit, is you're speaking directly to the executive. Is it a mindset of just you have to take action, you have to keep planning, you can't wait until this stuff goes away? Like, what's the thought process?
Look, I don't like to say always and never.
Yeah.
I'm going to say you are forfeiting your role as leader if you don't take decisive action now. Uncertainty is a great time. Let the lazy people and the lazy leader, seriously, let the lazy leadership, just muddle along here. But this is not we're going to muddle through this. This is take decisive action, get the right information. But I am very optimistic that both the U.S. and China will grow. And technology is not going to slow down. And the 2 countries, particularly as China, let's go back to U.S. company for a second. How many of the U.S. companies you're selling to the U.S. company now sets up in Europe. They set up in Japan. Well, you're now selling to those guys. And that was a natural progression. If you're number 1 or number 2 in your niche and your customer's number 1 or number 2 in their niche, well, China's the same way, and they're going outside of their country. They are not nearly as equipped in terms of their education, in terms of their, I would say, cultural. They bring a lot of baggage to cross-cultural relationships. And with you having that international presence as a U.S. supplier, you're going to be able to meet their needs better. And so, again, these are for non-strategic industries so they're not related to national defense for either the U.S. or China.
Is there any kind of closing thoughts that you have that you would want to share with those leaders, things that we maybe haven't talked about, but any other closing thoughts that you've got for those executives?
Thanks. And when I do this, I appreciate what you guys do. I'm not great in marketing. I like to be a giver. I like to have a servant attitude as a leader. Give me a a really difficult challenge. A plastics recovery business, get from 0 to 140 tons when nobody's ever done it. At 97% efficient, start a heart stent factory for laser machining. But so this may sound a little bit self-serving, but we found very early in China that having one operation only, there's just no way the complexity of doing business in China, all aspects, tax, people, government, the commonality of different types of factories was more reliant on our knowledge of the China situation. So that's why my ideal relationship is, let me own 30%. I'll put in all the cash for that. Mr. German, Israeli, U.S. tech partner, Canadian, you guys own 70, but let me run it. And that's worked extremely well because we can rely upon them for technology. But the fact that we have these 10 plus operations has really helped us withstand corruption, pay the right taxes, but not pay more than the right taxes, work with local governments to overcome issues that happen from utilities, have training, cross training of people. And so I would say, you're going to have to get somebody with China. If you don't have it now more than ever, it's important to have somebody in China that you can trust and that you can work with them, or other countries. We certainly have done that when we've expanded to Bulgaria. We have a partner there, actually two partners, and the Philippines similarly. I would just, it's not just you're either there and we're going to do it all by ourselves, or we totally leave. Mm-hmm. If you totally leave and you say you're a world-class company, I would dare to say you're not. Mm. So, find good relationships, just like in marketing and strategic planning. Go with people that do this for a living, and how we operate operations there. It's much easier, and that's not found, by the way, in private equity. I'm sorry, private equity. So people know we're a family fund. We don't historically ever borrow, so we don't do 10 a year. We don't have exits. And sort of we make our money the hard way by profits and dividends. And if it's not there, if we're taking retained earnings and turning in new CapEx, okay, that year our cash flow is more constrained, but that's okay.
And so I love that kind of central thought. And that central thought is, you don't have to go alone. There's other people that know how to do this. Finding the right people to work with and partners is key. And that's true in just about any aspect of business anyway, and life in general. And so, going back to those executives, those leaders, it's like, don't wait, be decisive, find people that you can go along the road with, and do it now.
Yeah. And let me just say one other on the flip side. So we don't really invest significantly in U.S. operations because we don't give value added. We've had 30 plus partners. No partner has ever kicked us out. Mm. In fact, when there's been exits with PE, the new buyer says everybody's out, and they say, wait, no, PRI, would you please stay in? But let's go to the flip. There are privately held Minnesota, U.S. manufacturing companies that are really good, but they may be stuck in this 20 million a year revenue, 30 million, 50 million. And they're going like, can I go from a job shop to volume production? Can I go from 2 family of parts to 6? Can I reach out? So for non-strategic industries, there are Chinese privately held businesses that have some niche technology that may complement you. And just like how China drove a super hard bargain for Ford, General Motors, Medtronics, and others, where they said, okay, you come in with all the cash and we'll give you less than 50% of the company. And really, we don't want you to come in and manage, we'll manage it. Now the reverse is here. The Chinese privately held companies are needing to get out of China, are needing to expand from China. And they have technology that they can instantly give you. and they have cash, the timing of how you can get that cash might be delayed versus all at one time. But give them a new expansion project in the back of your factory, get a second building. You manage it. Do not give them management control. They'll be okay with that. Take their technology and go after it, and they'll fund it.
That's a good thing. Any other final words?
I'm grateful for the next step for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, it's been a blessing as always. Thank you again, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
And God bless all the listeners.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that.